Hello, my name is Harry, and as I said last time, I'm going to be talking about the Korean War today. The Korean War lasted from 1950 to 1953, and started with the North Korean invasion of South Korea. North Korea, after its creation, had been heavily funded by both China and Russia, and was supplied with T-35s, which it still uses to this day, whereas South Korea had been nearly completely neglected, as well as the South Korean government was incredibly corrupt. When North Korea invaded South Korea, it seemed like a pretty easy war for North Korea. In fact, North Korea nearly beat South Korea when a UN military force intervened in South Korea, primarily made out of soldiers from the United Kingdom and the United States. In fact, soldiers from 16 Western countries came to fight in South Korea, including ones from Australia, New Zealand, Ethiopia, and Colombia. But when the Western soldiers started to beat North Korea, there was a bit of a debate going on, because firstly, this was the first proxy war in the Cold War, and there was a bit of a debate on how to pursue it. They debated going Iraq-style, and just pushing the North Koreans back to their border and keeping it that way. But Douglas MacArthur, a glorified World War II American general, wanted to take all the credit for defeating the North Korean threat, as he was in charge of the American forces, and decided he would take it into his own hands and defeat the North Koreans. But the Chinese hadn't intervened in the Korean War because they had just been through a costly civil war which just ended in 1949, and were actually at the time in the process of annexing Tibet. But when they saw that the North Koreans were getting thrashed and pushed back up, and the American soldiers were getting close to their borders, the Chinese thought that their security was at risk and intervened. With around 1.5 million soldiers, with the Soviets operating with about 40,000 soldiers in North Korea. For the next few years, the war was really back and forth, and did not get anywhere. The Soviet forces tried their best not to fight American soldiers, because Joseph Stalin was afraid of starting a war. A nuclear war. Douglas MacArthur wanted to use about 150 tactical nukes to attack Chinese soldiers in North Korea and military bases in Manchuria, the region bordering North Korea. And it was an ongoing debate. It wasn't like Douglas MacArthur was going to use the nukes to just wipe Shanghai and Beijing off the map, but he definitely wanted to use them. And you're probably thinking, that would be radical, that would be insane. But at the time, the nuke was incredibly new, it wasn't as devastating, and it was a debate on the ethics of how to use them. And the debate ended with Harry S. Truman firing Douglas MacArthur, after he suggested nuking Chinese soldiers and starting an embargo on China. The war only ended with Joseph Stalin's death. Joseph Stalin, in his later life, got incredibly paranoid. He, in his earlier reign in the early 1930s, he had done lots of executions and purges against Soviet officers and his own military. But at that point, during the Korean War, a simple mistake would take you to a firing squad. In fact, he would lock himself in his room for hours, and he even told his guards not to let anyone in. And when the guards one day heard lots of movement inside, they were incredibly afraid to go in. Only a doctor, when a doctor was called, went in there to find that Joseph Stalin was close to death because he had had a seizure. And he would have been able to have been saved if he had actually gotten people inside there. He was succeeded by I think I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Mikhail Kuzovich. And he was definitely a more moderated Soviet leader who told the entire Russian public the atrocities and killings that Joseph Stalin had done, and in fact, many people had heart attacks because they idolized Stalin, and to find out that he killed nearly 2 million of his own people in the military, let alone, and in total he had about killed 60 million people from, like, countries all over the world. And the war started to cool down in Korea. Not a lot came out of the war. North Korea gained a small village, and South Korea gained a much larger but highly uninhabited plot of land. And there was a demilitarized zone, which it still exists today, on the North Korean and South Korean border. It's a bit of an understatement because the demilitarized zones are one of the most militarized places in the world. But the point of the zones is to make sure that no active military units operate in there, like armies. In total, around 900,000 South Korean people died, were died or were missing in action. Of that 900,000, about 300,000 had been abducted or kidnapped. Of the Chinese 1.5 million people that operated there, about 100,000 of them had died, and civilian-wise, about 200,000 North Korean civilians had died, about 1 million South Korean civilians died, and about 1.5 million North Korean soldiers died. And the war just showed how brutal the rest of the Cold War was. In fact, it was the Cold War, in its long timeline, was one of the most bloody wars in history, and at the same time never became an actual war between the two opposing sides. I'm going to set the framework for my next video, which is about the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War dates back a long time ago, and some historians think that it started just after World War II. Well, I hope you have a good time. Please subscribe to this channel. Have a good day.